Hello and welcome to Master Gardening. I'm your host, Bud Kwok, and today we're in iris heaven. I'm not kidding. This may be one of my best shows. So stay tuned. We'll be right back. Yes, today is iris heaven, and we're here at the home of Denny Dreyer and his lovely wife, Jeffrey. And it almost takes my breath away to see all these blooms, Denny. I'm not kidding. And I'm a master gardener, and I've seen a lot of blooms, but this... When did you start doing this? This is like maybe 20 years ago, 30 years ago?
I've always been interested in irises. My mother grew irises, and about 30 years ago, when we moved to Kentucky, my mother gave me a few irises to grow in my yard. And so I continued to grow over the irises over the years, and eventually, when I retired, I really got into growing quite a few irises.
Yes, you did.
Today I have about 700 varieties, all tall-bearded irises, and I got into hybridizing when I retired also. So
Hybridizer.
I'm not an amateur hybridizer.
But you don't have any named after your wife yet?
No named irises.
No named irises
No.
yet? That's pretty complicated. And you are on some kind of, you're on the iris board or something?
Yes, the Tall-Bearded Iris Society is a cooperating society to the American Iris Society, and I'm on the board of directors of that organization.
Okay, tall-bearded irises, and we'll get into that in just a minute. Okay. But let's this bed right here, and I don't, since we're standing next to it, this is a brand new bed.
Yes, this was just replanted last fall, so it's not blooming very well. And there has not been much increase on the rhizomes that are planted in this bed.
1 year.
Since last fall.
That's pretty darn good for since last fall. And you used raised beds. I see on almost all your plants you have raised beds. And is a big advantage to that?
Yes, it just makes it easier as I get older.
I don't
have to get down on the ground quite as far.
Yeah.
And I have 9 beds located down the hillside here, and we'll see those as we go through the program, I guess.
So the raised beds are easier to keep the soil, make the soil better?
Yes, I build the bed and add soil to it, combination of topsoil and manure and some sand to keep it loose. The Kentucky clay is not very conducive to growing irises, so I've amended it
Not
very
Kentucky
severely.
clay, red, but it kind of keeps them corralled a little bit.
That's right. They spread. And I use pine straw to keep the weeds down. It's pretty much a continuous operation from March until October to keep the weeds out, and daily go past the beds and pull weeds every day.
Yeah, the pine mulch. You don't have any pine trees. I guess you buy that.
No, I actually have a friend that I have a ready supply. All I have to do is rake it and
he loves for you to come over.
Yeah, right.
That stuff lasts 2 or 3 years.
Yeah, a couple of years,
as opposed to some other mulches.
It'll eventually work its way in. The irises don't seem to mind the acidity of the pine straw.
Oh, that's right. The iris is like a little bit sweet on the pH scale.
Generally from about 6.8 to 7.2.
Okay.
So I'll add lime occasionally to the bed.
Okay, yeah, I was going to say that any kind of mulch you put on there is going to make it more acid pretty well.
Yes.
So you got to keep doing that.
Pine straw seems it keeps the soil more moist, but doesn't and generally keeps the weeds down pretty well.
And just a little bit of lime every few years.
Every year or two.
Fertilizer maybe.
6-24-24. I'll fertilize early in March when the new growth starts. About 6 weeks before the bloom, and then again in the late fall.
If our viewers didn't catch that 6-24-24, they really don't like a lot of nitrogen, right?
No nitrogen, low nitrogen.
Low nitrogen, okay.
It tends to cause a lot of rot.
Oh, rot, and that's one of the biggest problems with
That's one of the biggest problems you have.
Okay.
Standing water, they don't like their wet feet, so they like well-draining soil. And I take care of them all the time.
And I know you're going to think this is a stupid question, but some of them you can see the rhizomes right on the top of the soil.
Yeah, the rhizome is actually part of the stem, and it is lays right on the surface of the soil so the sun can see it.
It likes it. It likes the sun.
If you plant them too deep, they won't bloom.
And they'll rot, maybe.
And they will rot.
Okay, that's another one. I'll tell you what. Let's move to another place. We talked about this one. Doesn't have a whole lot of bloom. Let's go down farther into the bed where they got a lot of bloom. This is a good time of the year for it. Finally.
Yes, it is. Right in the middle of bloom.
All right. Okay, Denny, there's a lot of them blooming down here, and I see you got. What do you use these for?
I use these to support the iris. We get a lot of wind here right out by the lake, and the tall bearded irises tend to lay down.
Top heavy.
They top heavy, and they tend to lay down in the wind. So I use these support.
I see bunches of them. I'm sure they're not inexpensive, are they? No.
No, they're not too expensive.
Now, I think you told me
this one here is Master Gardener. It was it's an old iris. This was a 1990 introduction.
I like a Master Gardener. Yeah, I wonder why. That's beautiful, but it's not special, is it? It's not really.
It's
like most Master Gardeners. We're not.
it's relatively plain in terms of the some of the irises
compared
that I have.
To some of the other ones. Okay, there's a bunch of really tall, nice ones here, Denny. Do you have any favorites? I can see a couple here.
Yes, this multicolored ones are really my favorites. This particular variety here is Let's Be Friends is the name of it. It was introduced by Vincent Christopherson in 2003. I've had it for about 10 years now, and so the bicolor, multicolored irises are the ones that I'm really partial to.
Well, just looking through you get nine beds here. They're looking. The blue ones seem to be maybe your favorites. I would have thought.
I have a lot of blue.
Yeah, you have
purple.
like half of them are blue. Yeah, or purple.
It just so happens that most of them are blooming today, and they stand out in the garden pretty vividly.
Let's explain to our viewers what's made up. What part is the leaves?
The flower petals that stand up are called standards.
Right there in the middle.
And those that droop down are the falls.
Now these are all bearded, right?
They're all bearded iris. The beard is the little caterpillar-like looking fuzzy thing on the.
I didn't know that.
On the center of the fall.
The little old fuzzy thing's the beard, I guess. I thought maybe these outside, but those are the falls, standards.
This particular variety is Shore Patrol. It was introduced by Moore in 2002.
And I see.
I have most
you got
of mine.
Cheat stick here.
Most of my irises are labeled. I use Kincaid irises. They're stainless steel, so they will not diminish over the years. I have the name of the iris, my own identification number on each of them, printed on there. It's on a waterproof laser label.
Oh my gosh. Yeah, I have trouble with labels. Even my tomato plants, I can't get the piece of labels.
Waterproof paper, you can buy them at the Office Depot type stores.
Oh yeah?
And you have to have a laser printer to print them.
I don't have a laser printer.
I have one that I use exclusively for that.
9 beds.
9 beds. I have about 90 clumps in each bed. Then I have other beds in other areas of the yard, up in the front yard. Total, I have about 700 actively growing varieties at this point in time.
And what I was getting at, this is almost a full-time job. No?
Yes, pretty much takes care of most of my spring and summer and fall.
They like full sun.
They like full sun.
So you're out here at least sweating every day.
At least 6 hours of sun during the day.
6 hours plus.
And
so
these beds out here in the backyard typically have about from about 8 o'clock in the morning until 5 in the afternoon they have sun.
And you have a hybridizing bed over in the corner. We're going to visit that in a minute.
Hybridizing, as I said, when I retired in 2005. And,
trying to find something to do.
I've got plenty of things to do. And so I have a ceiling bed where I have about 800 varieties that I've hybridized over the last 10 years.
These things are beautiful. Is this a good time of the year to be moving them somewhere? Say you wanted to give me one today.
No, I can't. I can't give you one today. I usually, when all the flower blooming is finished, and it'll be finished in about 2 weeks from now, then I'll cut off all the flower stalks and let them rest and grow a little bit for a week, couple weeks, and then come through and start digging them and dividing them.
Okay. And you have to do that, or
you have to do it after every 3 or 4 years. As the clump increases in size, it'll start getting too crowded, and the bloom will diminish over time.
So you got to separate them
all.
So
you separate them off, and once the rhizome has a flower stalk bloom on it, that rhizome will never bloom again. So that's one to be a throwaway at some point.
But that's why you leave for 2 or 3 weeks.
It'll grow increases, new fans off the side of the main rhizome, and those new ones are the continuation of that variety.
It's like daffodils. You want to give them time to grow the new rhizomes for next year.
That's correct. Yes.
Correct. Hey, I got one in a row there. So then you as soon as it gets done blooming, you want to cut that stalk back because it.
That's right. You cut it back. I spray it with a 10% bleach solution to ensure that there's nothing, no bacteria get into that cut stalk.
To rot it?
To start to rot, and it'll let it make sure there's air. It's open to the air so it can dry and get a crust over it, a scab over it.
So we keep talking about rot. That's the main thing. Is there any other pests or anything that cause problems?
Yeah, there are several pests in the Midwest. Iris borers is probably the worst. Fortunately, knock on wood, I haven't had any iris borers forever. And I'm lucky because if you get an iris borer in your bed, you have to dig it and just throw that whole thing away. There's no
How do you know that's in there? Probably it drills holes in it.
Well, it grows in the rhizome itself. It'll rot. And
yeah.
But the iris rot is the biggest problem I have. Even with the well-drained soil that I have in the beds now, this spring has been very wet and cool, and so we get a lot of water. And if they never get dried out for a week at a time, then you'll start seeing some rot. Generally, it occurs right at the base of the where the flower stalk will come up.
Mm-hmm.
Right at the base of the fan that's actually the flower stalk comes out of.
This is the fan right here?
The fan is the green leaves that come off from one particular spot.
Okay, say for instance, I came back in a couple weeks and you were going to give me one. What? You just get, it'd be the rhizome with the fans cut off?
The fans would be cut off to about 6 inches and the roots cut to about 2 inches.
So I'd take it home
It'd be a bare root transplant. You plant it so that obviously the roots are in the ground, the rhizome is sitting the top surface of it's exposed to the air.
It likes being on the surface.
It has to be on the surface.
Okay.
If you plant them too deep, they won't bloom.
Oh,
and it'll tend to rot easily too.
Yeah, okay. They won't bloom unless they can see the sun on the rhizome. I knew they'd like that, but I didn't know why. So yeah, it won't bloom. Yeah. So
here, another variety that I think is really nice is this is Stolen Sweets. This is white. It's got a very distinctive beard, and it has a very slight yellow rim around the flower and around on the falls and on the standards.
That's beautiful. That's beautiful, and you can see the beard real easily on that one, as opposed to the purple ones. You got to kind of dig down in there and try to find it.
That was a 2009 introduction from Paul Black.
How do you remember all that stuff?
Well, some of these I know I've had for several years, and I tend to favor them.
Yeah.
So
yeah.
There are probably 300 of them. I couldn't tell you what the names are.
Now, this one's blooming. How long is it going to bloom before that starts? Here's one that's fading right now.
An individual flower will last, from the time it opens, it'll last about 3 days. It somewhat depends on the temperature. If it gets into the mid-80s, it might fail on the 3rd day. If it's cool, 70-degree, 55 night, it might last 4 or 5 days. When they basically fade, they will just kind of shrivel up, and generally, like this one, there'll be another flower in that same flowers.
I see that.
So I'll just pinch that one off, and then in another day or so, that other flower will bloom.
right on the same. I thought there was just one in each one of those, but there's two.
Well, 2, 3. It varies from. A good iris will have a minimum of 6 and maybe up to 10 flowers on a single stalk. So you'll have double flowers in the sockets or triples.
I didn't know they had more than one flower in a socket.
Here's one that's this is the terminal bud, and there'll be another one down here.
Oops. Oh,
Now
okay.
you've got
Sorry. Don't hit me. They've got a very distinctive.
Some of them have a scent. They're not real strongly, generally not strongly scented, but some of them are just absolutely no scent at all.
They're on these long stems. How good are they for taking in the house?
They're great for cut flowers. Jeffrey really likes having cut flowers in there. I don't like her to.
Don't cut them.
I tell her not to cut them. But
you got enough.
We're in constant battle. Yeah, I'll thin them out occasionally. She'll get.
She takes the good ones,
inside.
though, right?
Yeah, I don't let her take the good ones.
Oh, okay. Okay, let's go down to see some more down here. Another move around a little bit. Make Dan do his job. Okay. Did he? I'd have these on me all the time. I think when I go to work at the bank, I stick one in my lapel, and I see it. I know this isn't a pretty thing, but it's a seat, and then this is the best thing I like about it.
It's a nice kneeler.
Saves your knees.
The older you get, the more you appreciate something like that.
Because I know there's some women that can bend over and just get that, but I have to get down on my knees to do that. And I guess you do too. I tore one of my falls.
Well, I'll give you another flower.
There's some really pretty ones up here.
Yeah, this bicolor here is kind of a peach color and a maroon fall. That's broad shoulders.
Okay.
The one next to it is Secret Rights. That was a Keith Keppel introduction.
Secret Rights?
Secret Rights is the name of that one.
And it's got multicolored standards.
Got a little darkness on the standards, and
that's unusual.
It's got a sibling that looks very similar to it also.
A sibling?
Yeah.
You call them siblings, really?
Another iris that came out of the same seed pod.
Oh, they call them siblings. I didn't know that either.
This one variety right over here is called Slovak Prince. That was an introduction several years ago. This has a real fine yellow rim on the standards.
You have to look really close.
Very attractive iris.
Yeah.
And another of my favorites is this one here, Bronze Peacock. It has a wide rim, reddish rim around a violet in the fall, and then a kind of the reddish violet standards.
They're just all so delicate, This one's a pure white one here, and sometimes you just like to go back to, you get all the multicolors and everything. And I'm helping you here. I'm not going to charge you for that.
That's Nordica.
It is.
I have several whites that have anywhere from a yellow beard to a tangerine. This one is more tangerine.
You can see the beards real easily on that one. Now, some of them have more frills to them than others. Yeah, that one's kind of a flat.
The more recent introduction, and certain hybridizers tend to enhance the roughly nature of some of these irises.
So that's more popular than maybe right now.
Some hybridizers specialize in trying to hybridize to increase those traits in the iris.
Make it more attractive. Now, this is our third year that we tried to do this.
Yes.
I think one year, the first year, the weather was terrible. It came in and wiped everything out.
Yes, it does.
Because if you have terrible thunderstorms, they don't like it. They're so delicate. And then it also conflicts with graduation.
Yes.
So May is the best time of the year?
From late April to mid-May. Bloom season generally will last about 4 weeks in total.
Okay, that's great.
There's actually three identities in these tall beardeds. There's the early bloomers, the mid-season bloomers, and the late bloomers. So the ones that are blooming today will be all finished by another week from now, and there'll be another series of them that are still in buds yet that will be blooming in the next week.
Okay, trick question. Do any of them bloom more than once?
Yes, there are rebloomers. I have several. Haven't identified any of them specifically, but they will, as long as you don't let them go dormant in the summertime and keep them watered all summer long, the reblooming varieties will bloom again starting in maybe August, September, and bloom up until frost.
Is that as good a bloom as you get in the spring?
No, they're not as good, and even those are not as prolific of bloomers in the spring.
But you do get some color.
But you get some color in the spring, and you get, in the fall you also get them.
Yeah, as long as you keep watering them.
As long as you keep them from going dormant during the summer.
And then dormant, when you say dormant, that means the leaves turn yellow?
No, they just quit growing. They just stop growing. They'll stay green, but they just don't increase and grow.
So if they turn yellow, that means you've done something wrong.
Yeah, yeah, that's true.
Probably not watered them or something. Okay, well, let's go over to your hybridizing bed, Denny.
Okay.
Next.
And,
I'm excited about that.
Show you all about the hybridizing.
Okay. Denny, this is a huge bed here, and it's back kind of, you got a big lot here, don't you?
Yes,
you go
sure
way
do.
back into the woods, so yeah.
Well, this is one of the my crosses that I made actually 2 years ago, and you can see in this one, all these flowers are out of the same seed pod.
Oh my!
So you have a wide variety of colors that are the siblings. This one here is somewhat unusual for that seed, for the rest of them, because it's so peach colored. Peach and white, where most of them are yellow. Some of them have a darker yellow color, and others have a white falls on them.
Yeah, that's real dark, and that's, of course, that's pure white with the yellow around the edges.
So this was
and another one like that.
This was the mother plant here was a named iris called That's All Folks that actually won the Dykes Medal 2 years ago. And the Dykes Medal is the highest honor that a tall bearded iris can have.
Tall bearded, you keep saying tall bearded iris. There's other kinds. What are the other kinds?
There's the tall bearded is a class. There are the miniature tall bearded, which is slightly shorter iris. There's the standard dwarf bearded, the miniature dwarf bearded, the intermediate, border bearded. I mean, they're all bearded irises, but they're all different classes in the iris.
And there's irises that aren't bearded.
Then there are beardless irises.
Beardless irises.
And there are other varieties, other types of irises.
Oh, my goodness.
Louisianas, Siberians, Pacific Coast species. So there's just a wide variety of irises.
Now, so you said species. Normally that means that's a really big...
a wild iris.
Wild iris. Wild iris species.
Now here's another cross that I made several years ago that has a wide variety of
Be careful.
Color.
We don't have any insurance.
Okay, this whole group of flowers here is from one particular cross.
They're beautiful.
You can see some have kind of a pale yellow, blue to violet falls. This one here is all violet. Some of these over here have more white standards with the bluish violet falls, and then others with a more pronounced yellow standard and a violet falls.
Now, there are different colors of beards also that you can get out of that?
Some of the beards are different. They tend to, in any given cross, they'll tend to have the same beard color, but there's some variety in them. You can see the darker ones tend to have darker beards.
These are these out of the same ones too?
Yeah, that's all. This whole group is from the same.
And here, here's one down here that's yellow. Got yellow
more
standards.
Yellow, yes.
Oh my. So that's got to be a lot of fun. You say, hey, I got a different one.
Yeah,
hey,
it's interesting. This cross was actually one I made in 2008, and so I've been growing these, and I will probably thin these out some this year. I have to dig these. They're getting too crowded.
But these are yours. You made these.
These are crosses that I made in 2008. Basically, I take and after the seeds will grow in a pod after the flower's been fertilized, and then it'll, as the summer goes on, it'll dry up, then I'll harvest the pod. There'll be anywhere from a few to maybe 80 seeds in a pod, and then I'll let them dry, then plant them in the fall, let them overwinter outside. They've got a germinating inhibitor on the surface of the seed that has to be washed off. So it takes anywhere from 1 to 2 years for the seed to germinate from the rain and snow in the wintertime. Once the seed germinates, it'll grow a small single leaf iris. I'll then transplant it into the ground when it germinates, and then it'll take another 2 years till you'll see a flower off of it. So it's at least a 3 and sometimes a 4 year commitment to see the results of what you've created.
And the old saying is, I'm so old I don't even buy green bananas anymore.
Right.
So to get one of these, that's
This was a 2008 cross.
7 years.
I planted these initial germinations in 2009. I saw the first bloom in 2011, and I've moved them after that. I moved them into this area. They've been in this bed now since 2012.
And none of these are named. You don't have a name?
None of them are named.
Well,
you have to register them to get a name. Most of these are not, I don't think, are really worthy of introduction. They have to have, like I said earlier, anywhere from 6 to 10 to 12 flowers on a single stalk. Most of mine don't. I mean, this one will have 4 flowers on it. Most of the yellow ones that we saw a few minutes ago, some of those now have 8 or 9 blooms on them. So this was the first year there was a bloom. So I'll let them bloom a couple years in a row to see if they still contain the good growth genes, and then maybe we'll find some to introduce one of these years.
Well, we're running out of time, Denny, but I want to thank you.
Okay,
this has been
Bud.
you're probably the biggest in Kentucky, maybe in this part of the country.
Well,
as far as irises go.
there are several growers in this area.
So I want to thank our viewers also for tuning in. I'm your host, Bud Kwok. Until next time, good gardening. Hello and welcome to Master Gardening. I'm your host, Bud Kwok, and today we're in iris heaven. I'm not kidding. This may be one of our best shows. So stay tuned. We'll be right back. Yes, today is iris heaven, and we're here at the home of Denny Dreyer and his lovely wife, Jeffrey. And it almost takes my breath away to see all these blooms, Denny. I'm not kidding. And I'm a master gardener, and I've seen a lot of blooms, but when did you start doing this? This is like maybe 20 years ago, 30 years ago?
I've always been interested in irises. My mother grew irises, and about 30 years ago, when we moved to Kentucky, my mother gave me a few irises to grow in my yard. And so I continued to grow over the irises over the years, and eventually, when I retired, I really got into growing quite a few irises.
Yes, you did.
Today I have about 700 varieties, all tall bearded irises, and I got into hybridizing when I retired also. So
Hybridizer.